I'm Scott. I'm a Quiet Place fan.
Hi, I'm Senthil, and I'm a Bird Box fan.
So the two of us have decided, since we disagree, we're going to start watching as many horror movies as we can and come up with a new way of rate them. Come join us.
Hey, good afternoon, Synthil. It's good to see you again.
Good afternoon, and good to see you too. What movies are we discussing today, Scott?
Synthil, I'm excited because we've thrown a couple of texts back and forth in this, and we disagree this week. And so I am looking forward to this conversation. I really am. So this week we've got two films by director Josh Rubin. One of them is his first film, which was a low-budget film. His second film, and that film was on Shudder. So Shudder bought that at the Sundance Festival. His second film actually had a much larger budget. The two films we're looking at today is Scare Me, which is his low-budget micro-horror film, and then Werewolves Within, which was a much larger budget. We're not talking hundreds of millions of dollars here.
Werewolves Within was about a $6.5 million movie.
Okay.
Josh indicated that his Scare Me movie was about just under $400,000 budget.
Okay. So where would you like to start?
Let's start with Scare Me. What was your reaction to Scare Me?
So I'm going to tell you right off the bat, Synthil, I loved this film. Now, you had tweeted me before this and said you had not liked it. And so I was really scared when I went in there. You have to purchase the film. I think it was when I got it, it was like $5.95, which is more than I usually pay for a film. You know, it's a micro horror film, usually at $3.99 to $4.99. So I was kind of nervous when I hit that button. Synthil, I loved this film. Now, maybe it's because I've just started writing and I'm trying to understand the craft and understand how it works. To me, as they were talking about writing and Fanny was giving him all of this crap about it, and as the movie played out, I fell in love with both of these characters. I thought they were unbelievable. I thought the director, Josh Rubin, who plays one of the main characters, Frank, Fragile Frank is what Franny calls it, which I also thought was great. It was all these F's, right? You had Fragile Frank and Franny. He did this really great job. His facial expressions just shared so much. And I was actually sad that the movie ended. I could have watched that for another 15, 20 minutes of them acting out these different scenarios and different stories. I just fell in love with this damn film. So your thoughts?
You know, when I saw the movie, I was really intrigued by the concept, and throughout it I was, because for our audience, it's not just a low budget movie, but it's a low effects movie. The effects that they use are based off of their voice.
Yes.
How they tell scary stories. It's also based off of shadows that they build, and the shadows themselves are effective at conveying some scary scenes that they're discussing. It's also a limited set, effectively, where almost the entire movie happens in the confines of a cabin, and there are maybe 3-4 characters in the entire movie. So, you know, what they did and how they approached it was very impressive. What didn't quite work for me is that I didn't find that the stories were scary enough. The concept of being in a group of friends, and potentially friends, and maybe not friends in this case, but telling scary stories and trying to scare each other and one-up each other is interesting, but the stories themselves weren't captivating for me. And I thought the length of the movie was also, for me, because of that, was a little bit longer than I was comfortable with. But I had a positive reaction in the sense was it's a very unique approach. Very limited number of actors and sets, and he did a great job with it.
So one of the things I found interesting is, like you're talking about, the stories weren't scary, but I thought that was his whole point, right? It was ludicrous for two adults who saw themselves as these writers to be sitting in a room trying to scare each other as adults, right? There's a thunderstorm going. I mean, he was playing into these tropes of, the thunderstorm's outside, the electricity's out here, light a fire. And I thought the way that they were bouncing off of each other, well, that's, where they're going, oh, that's not scary, and that's not scary, I thought led up to the ending, which I love the ending because it almost crosses over, right? And like you said, Synthil, this movie was not a horror movie in my mind. I mean, there was really not a lot of scary about this film. But when you get to the ending, I flippin' love that ending. I love that ending because I never saw it coming. and you'd never know if he was crazy or not, right?
Yeah.
And it just he ended it in the comedic ending right after a little bit of the credits roll, and it's got this little ending that everybody has to sit around and watch for. I thought was just well done, right? The Book of Secrets that's turned into this fabulous book. I thought it was so well done.
There were two twists in the movie. There was the whether the character is really crazy or not, and then there was what the female lead was doing throughout that entire set of scary stories, which
Yes.
also goes to some of the motivations for writers and how they come up with their concepts. I didn't see that quite coming either. I probably should have in retrospect.
Yeah.
But I didn't, and so that was a little bit different, bit of a twist. The ending where the third character comes in and finds on the stairs, walks by, was a little bit off the wall. I didn't know quite to make of that, but conceptually, really great first attempt by the director.
So let me ask you this before we move to his next film.
Yeah.
Would you suggest this film to anybody else?
I think the length may be a challenge to viewers who aren't invested in it. I really thought this could be like a 1 hour TV show. In that context, I thought it would be really good, but the length was a little bit difficult for me, and I think it may be challenging for viewers as well. But I would say because of the concept, check it out.
I would say I would most definitely recommend this to my writing friends. All of the people that I communicate with out on Twitter, this is going to be a recommendation just because I thought it played into all of the fears writers have, right? You've got, the, imposter syndrome where the person is a better writer than you. And so you put it, I thought he picked up on that so damn well. But I know we've spent quite a bit of time on this, and I want to jump into Werewolves Within because Synthel, this is where you and I disagreed. So talk to me about what made you enjoy this. Well, not made might be even the wrong word. Why did you enjoy this movie more than you enjoyed Scare Me?
So Werewolves Within is also a fairly low effects movie. There's some limited effects, werewolf effects and murder scenes. But the mystery aspect of it was interesting to me, and I thought all the actors did a really great job of selling their characters and adding some complexity to their characters. So the performances I really enjoyed. I thought it was entertaining, and it was closer to a horror movie. I think that was probably the difference for me. Our mindsets were different. You went into Scare Me and saw a writer, and which is really probably more accurately describing that movie, right?
Yeah.
It said some writers. I went in looking for a horror movie, and therefore Werewolves Within fit that bill for me a little bit better. And the production values, obviously, he had more money to spend on it. So for the reasons, the performances of the characters and the limited use of effects, but yet still conveying the concept. And yes, we should have seen the climax telegraphed as well. This is one movie where I did pick up on that and didn't miss it like some of the others.
Yeah. So where Werewolves Within turned for me is I knew who the werewolf was pretty much from the start.
Yep.
What I liked about the film was it felt very Knives Out. So, yes. And I love Knives Out. I thought it was a well done comedic, it was like that Agatha Christie, but with a comedic, touch to it. And I think Werewolves Within kind of meshes this idea of horror and Knives Out. And I will say that Josh did a really good job of that. The challenge I will say, Simple, that I had is after Scare Me, I expected so much more because the way that he developed his characters in Scare Me, I thought went really well. And I felt connected to, especially to Fragile Frank, right? Because as a new author, I was connected to him and all of his fears. Werewolves Within, was a game, a video game. And I don't think anybody should ever make a video game into a movie. I mean, we learned that with Raccoon City, and and although I've enjoyed some of the Resident Evil franchise, it's hard to make a video game into a film. It felt like he was trying too hard, right? It was like in Scare Me, it felt like he was allowing the characters to naturally become and be who they were. Werewolves Within, it just felt like a script, and Scare Me didn't feel that way. And then the payoff at the end of Werewolves Within, right? You're expecting the big, I'm expecting the showdown. I'm expecting something, and you get something. But I will say, with the budget he had, he did more with the low budget, with Scare Me, with the shadows and the werewolf hand coming up over the top of the side, right? And a little bit of blood dripping off the side to build that little bit of dread coming through. And he had the budget with Werewolves Within to, I think, create an incredible payoff at the end. And I didn't get it. And I think that's where I left going. I love the characters. I love the story build up like Knives Out. And I get to the end and I went, give me the payoff. We're there.
That's an interesting, we've talked about this before. I think that when directors are working with smaller budgets, and in fact, I was impressed by the fact that the director indicated that part of the budget for this movie came out of his 401k from his previous gig. So he really believed in what he was doing to invest his own money into it. So then you go from a $380,000, $400,000 movie to a $6.5 million when the expectations are likely different from your investors in the studio that's backing you. So I suspect that my take out of this was that his objectives were completely different. The latter, Werewolves Within being more of an entertaining, scary murder mystery movie, while Scare Me was more of a character study and could afford to spend an hour and a half just developing characters, which I don't know that you get away with when you've got millions on the line.
Yeah, and you know what, Simple, that's a good call, and you're absolutely right. Again, I thought he did well with his characters in this. I mean, I like this director and the way that he treats his characters. You actually become in tune with them, right? You find yourself feeling in there, and he adds just enough comedy to the horror, right? He has the goofball people, he has the serious. I mean, I thought the choice he had for the sheriff was, not the sheriff, but the natural resources ranger was just spot on, right? I thought that was really well done. My favorite character, and of course the MacGuffin, I shouldn't have said that, should I, if you haven't seen the film, is the hunter up in the cabin, right? But it's done so well. It's done so well.
I think when you said it reminds you of Knives Out, it's an accurate description. Another movie this reminded me of when we talked about it previously, Wolf of Snow Hollow.
Yes.
Very similar, except this was more comedic, and the sheriff in that movie was
angry.
He was angry, and he had a different mindset. But the primary lead in this was not the kind of character I expected it. He didn't come across, this wasn't intended to be a hero stepping in saving the day, quite the opposite. He was as overwhelmed by the circumstances as the other characters. In fact, some of the other characters, I would say, were much more aggressive and interactive to their circumstances than he was. But yeah, I think different expectations, different objectives based on funding. We clearly talked about this in previous movies. You probably are not going to make Call Girl of Cthulhu or The Greasy Strangler with millions, right? No studio or investor is going to allow you to do that. So I think you have some freedom with micro budget that you otherwise wouldn't have.
Yeah, I would agree. And like I said, it wasn't that I didn't enjoy it, because I actually enjoyed this film. The payoff to me, Scare Me had the payoff that I was looking for. For the micro budget film, it was great. Now, would I tell people to watch Werewolves Within? Absolutely. I mean, it was fun. Like I said, it's a Knives Out horror film. I thought the acting was great. I thought the AT&T lady that they had in there, I can never remember her name, and I should have looked it up, but she was great in the role. Playing the postal worker. There were all of these little bits that played in really well together to create what I thought was a fun movie. I thought he just did more with less with Scare Me than he did with Werewolves Within.
I think there's a consistent pattern that we see. I'd love to talk to when we get to talk to some of these micro budget directors who've also had an opportunity to do bigger budget movies. what their approaches were like, and if they had more pressure from their investors and studios than when they had a micro budget. I suspect that's probably the reality, but how much different it is, I'd be interested. We've heard about even movies that cost hundreds of millions of dollars to make, which are quite a bit different. The Snyder Cut, a direct correlation of what the studio wanted versus what the director wanted. Clearly, the pressures, I suspect, change when you have more money on the line.
Yeah, you know what? That is a fantastic question that we should ask, because my guess would be exactly as you're saying, right? You are under, I don't want to say harsher constraints, but probably tighter constraints with investors or a movie house that is actually investing in you, and that you're having to pass everything through them.
What's interesting is that the Scare Me is what gave him the opportunity to do Werewolves Within. And however, while clearly his investors thought he did a great job at Scare Me, I'm sure they had different expectations when they gave him $6.5 million to do the movie.
Yeah.
So I was looking forward to talking to some of these directors and seeing what their experiences were.
I agree. And this is one of those directors, I've actually marked him in IMDb as to watch, because I think this is somebody who is going to sneak up on us and give us that horror film, the Hereditary in the near future, Midsummer, something like that we are going to absolutely, The Lodge, I kind of sense this from this director, it's coming.
Yeah, I think Scare Me is a good indicator that that's a possibility. There's a great Twitter thread from him and some of his fans on talking about him wanting to redo Darkman. I'd love to see a true horror take from the director of Darkman. I would be fully in support of that.
Wow. Yeah. Because you know what? The first Darkman wasn't horrible with Liam Neeson, but it never reached the potential of what it could have been.
Yeah. Yeah. We'd love to see Josh get a chance of doing that.
Well, do you have anything else that we need to discuss tonight?
No, I think enjoy the conversation as always.
Synthel, this was fantastic. I look forward to next week. And to everybody, we'll see you next week. Take care.
See you all next week.